Me! I would do anything! Why my baby? Why?
On a warm July night in 2020, 10-year-old Breasia Terrell sent her mother a short goodnight text message. She was at a sleepover. She was safe, smiling, and wearing an oversized white shirt to bed. By 8 o'clock the next morning, she was completely gone. 8 months later, 2 fishermen stepped off a dirt road into the quiet Iowa woods. They stumbled upon a discovery that shattered a community. It exposed a cold, calculating monster hiding in plain sight. Today, we're uncovering the case of Breasia Terrell. If you believe that innocent victims deserve a voice, and that we must remember their names to honor their lives, please take a moment to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us tell these crucial stories and keeps their memory alive. Davenport, Iowa sits right along the Mississippi River. It is a place where neighbors know each other. Kids ride their bikes down wide streets during the warm summer months. Life here usually moves at a gentle, predictable pace. But in July of 2020, that peaceful routine was shattered forever. Breasia was born on December 4th, 2009. Her mother, Aisha Langford, loved her deeply. From the time she was a toddler, Breasia lit up every room she walked into. She was a bright, bubbly 10-year-old girl. She had a wide, quick smile and dark dreadlocks that she loved to style. Like many kids her age, Breasia loved the simple joys of childhood. She spent hours hanging out with her friends outside. She loved making funny TikTok videos in her bedroom. She laughed easily and made others laugh even faster. At Jackson Elementary School, her teachers and classmates knew her as a truth teller. She was a child with a strong sense of right and wrong. Even at 10 years old, she showed a maturity way beyond her years. She was protective of her family. She looked out for her younger siblings, making sure they were fed, happy, and safe. She was her mother's little helper around the house. Thursday, July 9th, 2020, began like any normal summer day. The sun was bright and the air was warm. Breasia was excited because she was going to have a sleepover. It was not a sleepover with friends from school. She was going to spend time with her 8-year-old half-brother. Her brother was staying with his biological father, a man named Henry Earl Dinkens. Henry was staying at his girlfriend Andrea's apartment in Davenport. To Aisha, this felt completely safe. Henry was the father of Breasia's little brother. He was family. He was a trusted figure. There was no reason to suspect any danger. Breasia was happy to go along so she could play with her brother. Earlier that day, a neighbor spotted Breasia walking near the apartment complex, enjoying the early summer weather. As evening fell, the kids played video games in the bedroom. Andrea and Henry stayed in the living room. Everything seemed quiet. Everything seemed normal. Then came a small detail that felt slightly strange. Aisha had packed proper pajamas for her children, but Henry told the kids to put away their clothes. Instead, he handed both Breasia and his 8-year-old son 2 of his own massive 4XL white t-shirts. They were huge on the kids, falling past their knees. Breasia's brother later recalled that this felt very unusual. But at the time, nobody questioned it. It just seemed like a silly, oversized shirt to sleep in. Around 9:30 p.m., Breasia picked up Henry's phone. She typed out a quick goodnight text to her mom. Aisha saw the message on her screen. She smiled and typed back, "Good night, I love you, Bria. Thank you." That was the last message Aisha would ever receive from her daughter. Breasia curled up to sleep in that oversized white shirt. The apartment went quiet. Andrea went to bed before midnight. Henry stayed awake alone on the living room couch. The dark settled over Davenport. Outside, the night was silent. Inside, a terrible sequence of events was already beginning to move in the shadows. Breasia thought she was safe. She thought she was surrounded by family. She had no idea that while she slept, the person supposed to protect her was watching her in the dark. When the sun came up the next morning, Breasia Terrell was nowhere to be found. And the nightmare that followed would change Davenport forever. Friday, July 10th, 2020, began like any other workday for Aisha Langford. She woke up early, got ready, and drove to her job. Then, shortly after 8 a.m., her phone rang. It was Henry Dinkens. His voice came through the speaker, flat and quiet. He told Aisha that he had just woken up. He claimed he looked around the apartment and Breasia was nowhere to be found. He said he was heading straight to the police station to report her missing. Aisha stood frozen in her office. At first, she actually laughed out loud. It sounded like a cruel, bad joke. It made zero sense. Breasia was a cautious 10-year-old girl. She was afraid of the dark. She would never wake up early, unlock a door, and walk out into the street by herself. Panic slammed into Aisha's chest. Her hands started to shake. She left work immediately, ran to her car, and began dialing Henry's phone over and over. Henry did not answer. When he finally picked up, Aisha demanded to know where he was. They agreed to meet at a local MC Donald's. When Aisha pulled into the parking lot, Henry was sitting there. He repeated his story in a calm, hollow voice. He woke up, and she was simply gone. Aisha looked at his face, and a cold dread settled deep in her stomach. Something in his demeanor felt completely wrong. He didn't seem frantic. He didn't seem terrified. Aisha took her phone and called the Davenport Police Department. She told the dispatcher that her 10-year-old daughter was missing and that the father was right beside her. But the dispatcher told Aisha something that made her heart drop. Henry had never gone to the police station. He had lied to her. Within minutes, Officer Burkell pulled his patrol car into the parking lot of the apartment complex where Breasia was last seen. His body camera was running, recording every second. Aisha ran up to the squad car. Her voice was tight and sharp with panic. She told the officer that Henry had her daughter, that he didn't know how long she had been gone, and that his story kept shifting. Moments later, Henry walked slowly out of the apartment building. Trailing behind him was his 8-year-old son. Officer Burkell stepped toward them and asked when Breasia was last seen. Henry looked at the officer and said around 9:30 p.m. the night before. The officer asked what she was wearing. His young son chimed in, saying she wore the oversized white t-shirt Henry had given her. The officer asked Henry if he knew anyone else in the building. Henry shook his head and said no. The air grew heavy with tension. Aisha and Henry began shouting at each other in the parking lot. Aisha was overwhelmed with raw emotion. She couldn't stand looking at him. She got into her car to coordinate search efforts with her family, leaving the officer alone with Henry. Officer Burkell told Henry he needed to check the apartment. Henry walked up the stairs, knocked on the door, and told the officer that his girlfriend Andrea would handle it. Then Henry turned around and walked away down the sidewalk. When Andrea opened the door, she hesitated. She looked nervous. She asked the officer if he really needed to search inside. Eventually, she let him in. Officer Burkell walked through the rooms. He opened closets. He looked under beds. The apartment was completely empty of any sign of Breasia. When Officer Burkell stepped back outside into the sunlight, he looked down the sidewalk. Henry was gone. The officer needed more details from him, but Henry had vanished. Officer Burkell pulled out his phone and dialed the number Henry had provided. It went straight to voicemail. Over the next hour, Officer Burkell dialed Henry's phone 6 times. Every single call went unanswered. The inbox was completely full. At 10:43 a.m., the officer sent a direct text message begging Henry to respond. Silence. Finally, just after noon, nearly 4 hours after Breasia was reported missing, Henry called back. He casually told Officer Burkell that he was walking into the Davenport Police Department. Detectives led Henry into a small, windowless interview room. Right away, Henry made the process difficult. When asked for his home address, he claimed he didn't know the house number. When asked for his own son's last name, he paused and said he couldn't remember. He referred to Andrea, the woman whose apartment he stayed in, as just a close friend. Then, detectives pressed him for a timeline. Henry claimed that late Thursday night, after everyone went to sleep, he left the apartment to visit a friend named Vince. He said nobody answered the door, So he drove back. He claimed he was gone for 45 minutes. When he returned, he said he noticed Breasia was gone. But he didn't wake up Andrea. He didn't call Aisha. He didn't call 911. Instead, he said he left again to buy cigarettes at a convenience store. He claimed that when he got back the second time, he grabbed his 8-year-old son and spent hours driving around the Quad Cities searching for her. Detectives laid a printed Google map on the table. They asked Henry to draw the route he drove while searching for the little girl. Henry stared at the paper. He pushed it away and said he couldn't remember a single street he drove on. The detectives asked to see his phone. Henry refused to give them the passcode unless he could stand over them and watch. When they opened the call log, detectives pointed to multiple missed calls from Aisha from earlier that morning. Henry shrugged his shoulders. He said his phone acts up sometimes. The interview ended, but the truth was painfully clear. Henry's timeline was a messy web of contradictions. He had slipped away while police searched the apartment. He had ignored 6 emergency calls from an officer. And while Henry sat in that cool interview room making up excuses, 10-year-old Breasia was somewhere out in the summer heat, completely alone. What Henry didn't know was that while he was lying to detectives, police were already speaking to his girlfriend and his 8-year-old son, and the story they told would shatter his alibi into 1,000 pieces. While Henry sat in the interrogation room offering vague answers, investigators ran his name through federal and state databases. A dark truth instantly came to light. Henry Earl Dinkens was a registered sex offender. He had a severe criminal history involving minor victims. He had failed to properly update his registry information. Detectives took advantage of this violation immediately, placing him under arrest on registry charges to keep him off the street while they searched for Breasia. Meanwhile, other investigators were interviewing the people closest to Henry, his girlfriend, Andrea, and his 8-year-old son. Andrea's statement was horrifyingly different from Henry's smooth lies. She recalled waking up around 3 a.m. on Friday morning. The apartment was eerie and silent. She looked around, but Henry, Breasia, and her own car, a red Impala, were completely gone. She stepped out onto the apartment balcony and looked down into the dark parking lot. Through the shadows, she saw Henry's silhouette standing by the red Impala. Standing next to him was Breasia. Andrea watched as Henry opened the car door and put Breasia inside. He then got into the driver's seat and sped out into the night. When Andrea confronted him hours later, Henry claimed he had merely taken Breasia to get something to eat. But Andrea knew no fast food places were open for sit-down dining in the middle of the night. Then came the heartbreaking testimony from Henry's 8-year-old son. In a gentle, child-sensitive interview room, the young boy tried to make sense of what he had witnessed. He described a surreal, terrifying morning ride with his father. He remembered Henry driving him out to a rural area where a large motorhome was parked near a shed. The boy described seeing his father holding a long, silver knife, wiping down the blade with a rag. He also told officers about a sudden stop near a gravel road. He said his dad pulled over near a secluded pond, stepped out into the dense brush with a large container, and ordered him to stay in the car. Before getting out, Henry looked his young son in the eye and demanded that the boy take the battery out of his phone so nobody could track them. Investigators scrambled to verify the boy's words. They pulled surveillance footage from stores along the route Henry claimed to have taken. At 7:08 a.m. on Friday morning, less than an hour before Henry first called Aisha to say Breasia was missing, a security camera at a Walmart in Clinton, Iowa, captured Henry's face in sharp focus. He walked down the household aisle, picked up 2 massive 81-ounce jugs of Clorox bleach, and carried them to the register. Store receipts proved he bought the bleach using cash. A few miles away, at a farm supply store named Thiesen's, security cameras caught Henry's red Impala pulling into the parking lot. The footage showed Henry stepping out, opening his trunk, and pulling out a heavy, dark trash bag. He walked over to a commercial dumpster and tossed the bag inside before driving off. Investigators rushed to the dumpster, but it was too late. The trash had already been picked up and hauled to a regional landfill. A crucial piece of physical evidence was lost forever. Digital forensics experts step in to build a map of Henry's movements. They obtained warrant access to the cell phone towers along Highway 61 and Highway 30, spanning the rural farmlands between Davenport and Clinton. The tower data showed that Henry's phone picked up a signal near the apartment complex at 3 a.m. Minutes later, the phone began pinging off towers heading north out of Davenport, moving deep into Clinton County. Between 3:30 a.m. and 6:30 a.m., the phone pinged repeatedly in remote, unlit rural areas dominated by cornfields, gravel roads, and thick woods. There was a blank 32-minute gap in his phone data, a window of time where his phone went completely dead, exactly matching his son's story about removing the battery. When the phone powered back on, it pinged near the Walmart where he bought the bleach. Then it pinged near a rural property owned by his family members in Clinton County. Police descended on the rural family property. Crime scene technicians sprayed luminol inside the motorhome and around the red Impala. Luminol reacts with blood, glowing bright blue in the dark. The chemical reacted inside the Impala and around the camper. But someone had done a thorough job. Strong chemical odors hung heavy in the air. Fresh bleach had stripped away surface details, attempting to wash away the truth. FBI profilers joined the case. They had the bleach receipts. They had the video footage. They had the cell tower maps. They had the testimony of a child who watched his father wipe down a blade. Yet, as the days turned into weeks and the summer heat began to fade into autumn, one devastating question remained unanswered. Where was Breasia Terrell? Without her body, prosecutors knew a murder conviction would be incredibly difficult. Henry sat in his jail cell on registry charges, maintaining total silence. He offered no clues, no remorse, and no answers. Autumn turned into a bitter Midwestern winter. The ground froze solid in Scott County. Aisha Langford walked the streets, handing out flyers in the snow, refusing to give up hope that her daughter might still be alive. She had no idea that the answer was lying frozen under the snow just 20 miles to the north. 8 agonizing months passed. The summer heat of 2020 melted into autumn, and autumn turned into a harsh, freezing Midwestern winter. Snow covered the Quad Cities, burying the open fields in a blanket of blinding white. For Aisha Langford, every single day was a waking nightmare. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't eat. She spent every waking moment staring at her phone, hoping for a call, a text, or any sign that her sweet 10-year-old girl was still breathing somewhere. The search parties kept going, but as the ground froze, the tips began to dry up. The initial rush of news coverage started to fade into the background. A heavy, suffocating silence settled over the case. Through it all, Henry Earl Dinkens sat inside his jail cell. He was being held on those sex offender registration violations, but he refused to say a single word about Breasia. He watched the news. He listened to the community beg for answers. He kept his face completely blank, acting as if he didn't have a care in the world. He believed that because months had passed and no body had been found, he was going to get away with murder. Then March arrived. The winter snow began to melt under the early spring sun, exposing the damp earth beneath. On March 22, 2021, 2 local fishermen were driving along a quiet rural road in Clinton County, Iowa. They were looking for a good spot to fish near a small pond south of a farm supply business called Kunow Implement in DeWitt, roughly 20 miles north of Davenport. The air was crisp and damp as they pulled off the gravel road and parked their truck near the tree line. They stepped out into the quiet woods, pushing through the thick, overgrown brush toward the edge of the water. As one of the men looked down near a cluster of thick bushes, something caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just a piece of trash or discarded plastic sitting near the mud. But as he stepped closer and parted the branches, his heart dropped into his stomach. Lying on the damp ground was a human skull. The men froze in terror. They looked closer and realized they were standing over human remains partially hidden beneath dead leaves, heavy mud, and brush. Whoever had placed the body there had taken the time to snap thick tree branches and carefully stack them over the top in a desperate attempt to conceal it. Hands shaking, one of the fishermen pulled out his cell phone and called 911. Within 30 minutes, Clinton County Sheriff's deputies and Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation agents flooded the quiet woods. Yellow crime scene tape was stretched from tree to tree, sealing off the area. Crime scene investigators dressed in white Tyvek suits dropped to their knees, meticulously working through the mud. As the investigators carefully removed the cut branches and cleared away the debris, the heartbreaking truth began to reveal itself. The remains were dressed in a massive dark white t-shirt. It was an oversized 4XL shirt. Attached to the dark dreadlocks near the skull were tiny, delicate decorative seashells, the exact hair accessories Aisha had placed in her daughter's hair before she went to the sleepover. The forensic team cleared more dirt from the scene. Inside the mud, right next to the small bones, they uncovered two metallic objects. They were bullet fragments. The remains were transported directly to the state medical examiner's office for an autopsy. Dental records and DNA testing quickly confirmed what everyone in Davenport had prayed was not true. The body belonged to 10-year-old Breasia Terrell. During the detailed autopsy, medical examiners made another critical discovery. Deep inside the bone structure, they recovered a third bullet projectile. Breasia hadn't just been kidnapped. She had been executed. She had been shot, stripped of her dignity, and dumped in the brush like trash. The location where her body was found was not random. It was just a short distance from the pond where Henry's 8-year-old son remembered stopping on that horrifying July morning. It was the exact spot where the little boy watched his father step into the bushes with jugs of bleach. It was the exact spot where Henry's phone had gone completely dark for 32 minutes. The finding changed everything. The dark cloud of uncertainty was gone, replaced by a wave of cold, sharp anger. Detectives no longer had a missing persons case on their hands. They had a brutal, cold-blooded murder investigation. All the pieces of the puzzle, the oversized 4XL shirt, the missing cell phone battery, the 3 a.m. sighting on the balcony, the bleach receipts from Walmart, and the cell tower pings, snapped together into a horrifying picture of calculated evil. Henry Earl Dinkens thought the woods would keep his secret. He thought the melting snow and time would wash away his sin, but the truth had finally stepped out of the shadows. In May 2021, Clinton County prosecutors officially walked into court and filed formal paperwork. Henry Earl Dinkens was officially charged with first-degree murder and first-degree kidnapping. The fight for justice for Breasia Terrell was finally about to begin. 3 years after Breasia Terrell was taken from the world, the legal battle finally arrived. On August the 10th, 2023, the trial of Henry Earl Dinkens opened inside the Scott County Courthouse. Henry made a tactical decision right from the start. He waived his right to a jury trial. He opted instead for a bench trial, meaning his guilt or innocence would be decided entirely by a single judge. State prosecutors laid out their case piece by piece, building a wall of evidence so tight that no lie could break through. They called Andrea Culberson to the stand. She testified about waking up at 3 a.m. to find Henry and Breasia missing, seeing them outside by the red Impala, and watching Henry drive off with the 10-year-old girl in the dead of night. Next came the most heart-wrenching testimony of the entire trial. Breasia's younger half-brother, now 11 years old, stepped up to testify against his own father. His voice was quiet, but his words were devastatingly clear. He told the judge how his dad made him take the battery out of his phone, how his dad wiped down a long knife, and how he sat in the car while his dad walked into the bushes near the DeWitt Pond carrying jugs of bleach. Prosecutors brought out the physical evidence next. They displayed the 7:08 a.m. Walmart security footage showing Henry paying cash for 2 81-ounce jugs of Clorox bleach. FBI experts presented the digital maps, showing how Henry's cell phone pings tracked straight from Davenport up to Clinton County, matching the exact route to the woods where Breasia's body was found. The state medical examiner testified about the 3 bullet projectiles recovered from Breasia's remains, confirming she died from gunshot wounds. The defense tried to fight back by attacking witness memories and claiming there was no direct forensic proof linking Henry to the trigger, but their arguments collapsed under the weight of the timeline. The circumstantial web was so detailed and overwhelming that it left zero room for doubt. After days of intense testimony, Judge Henry Latham returned to the courtroom to deliver the verdict. The room went completely silent. Judge Henry Latham read the findings slowly. Henry Earl Dinkens was found guilty of first-degree murder and guilty of first-degree kidnapping. A collective sigh of relief echoed through the gallery, but the emotional climax came weeks later at the sentencing hearing in October 2023. State's Attorney Kelly Cunningham spoke for the prosecution, detailing Henry's decades-long criminal history, his total lack of remorse, and the deep destruction he left behind. She pointed to Breasia's little brother, describing how the boy's life had been completely derailed by the trauma of witnessing his father's evil acts. She demanded the harshest punishment allowed by law, 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole, served consecutively. When given the chance to speak, Henry Dinkens showed who he truly was. He took the microphone and offered no apology. He expressed no sadness for the child who lost her life. Instead, he whined about his own rights, claiming he had been railroaded by the media, the police, and the court. He blamed everyone but himself. Then Aisha Langford walked up to the podium. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice was strong with a mother's fierce love. She looked directly at Henry and spoke straight to his soul. "You broke my trust and emotions," Aisha said through her sobs. "You took my baby girl from me and just gunned her down. How do you sleep at night?" She described the agonizing nightmare of watching her family's innocence unravel, knowing she would never get to see Breasia grow up, graduate, or live her life. Judge Henry Latham looked down at Henry from the bench. He noted Henry's history of violence, his predatory behavior, and the horrific cruelty of taking a child's life. He handed down the final sentence: 2 consecutive life terms in state prison without the possibility of parole. The handcuffs clicked around Henry's wrists. Guards led him away into the dark hallways of the prison system, ensuring he would spend the rest of his natural life behind bars, never to walk free again. Justice had been served in a court of law, but inside the hearts of those who loved Breasia, the courtroom victory could not fix what was broken forever. The heavy courtroom doors swung shut, bringing an end to the legal trial of Henry Earl Dinkens. But the end of a trial does not mean the end of pain. For the family of Breasia Terrell, the silence left behind in her absence is a daily weight that never lifts. Her mother, Aisha, carries an unbearable grief. Every year, December 4th comes and goes without a birthday cake, without laughter, and without the bright, bubbly girl who lit up every room she entered. Breasia's younger brother carries his own invisible scars. A young boy forced to witness parts of a monstrous betrayal, bearing trauma that will take a lifetime to heal. When we look past the courtroom headlines and the cold police files, Breasia's story must be remembered for who she was. A joyful 10-year-old girl who loved her family, loved making TikTok videos, and brought honesty and light into the world. She was a child whose entire future was cruelly stolen before it ever had the chance to bloom. The tragic case of Breasia Terrell forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about safety, trust, and human nature. It serves as a painful reminder of key lessons every community must carry forward. Predators often wear familiar faces. Evil rarely comes as a stranger in a dark alley. Too often, threat lives behind the mask of a trusted family member, a friend, or a familiar figure. We must never let familiarity blind us to potential red flags. Listen to your instincts. The moment something feels wrong, a sudden shift in behavior, unusual requests, or evasive answers, trust that gut feeling. Aisha's immediate maternal instinct told her that Breasia would never simply wander off, spurring early police action. Protect the young voices. Children notice more than we realize. Breasia's younger brother showed immense bravery in telling the truth about what he saw, reminding us that we must create safe environments where children feel heard, supported, and protected when speaking up. Breasia Terrell deserved to grow up. She deserved to graduate high school, pursue her dreams, and live out a long, happy life surrounded by those who cherished her. As we close this story, let us carry her name forward. Honor her memory not by remembering the monster who took her life, but by remembering the bright, honest, and loving young girl she was. May her story remind us all to watch over our children, stay vigilant, and fiercely protect the innocent lives in our care. May Breasia Terrell rest in peace. Thank you for watching, for standing with us, and for honoring the lives behind the headlines. Until next time, stay safe, look out for one another, and keep seeking the truth.